5 June 65. Dearest Suzie, today is Saturday and I should be going on R&R tonight. I have a lot of things to do on this trip. I want to call you, visit the zoo again to get some pictures, and get to the PX and quartermaster. Each one of these things required just about a day because it is so hard to get around in Saigon. I am not going to Nha Trang. I found out this morning that the only way you can get that free 7 days is to go to Bangkok or Hong Kong. If you stay in Vietnam, it costs leave time, so I'm not going anywhere. We will spend a week at Daytona with the money I save. Yesterday, after I wrote to you, we got called out for a mission and flew until 11 o'clock last night. There was a USO show here last night too, and we missed it. Martha Ray was here. They say the show was pretty good. Anyway, when we got in, she was in the officers' club getting soused on straight vodka. This morning, I found out that they had a party that lasted till 2 o'clock, and she was the life of the party. Anyway, I missed everything. Why does it worry you to hear of the trouble in Da Nang? That is 400 miles from here. Well, I will close for now. I love you all very much, and I am still counting the days. It won't be long now. Time you go to New Jersey and back, I will be short. All my love, Bill. To supplement today's letter, I'd like to reference an article from Stars and Stripes. When I was given the opportunity to do some research at the Library of Congress, this was one of the things that I found. Given Popi's materials and the stories he told, this particular article really stuck with me. It is titled, Elephant Hunting? Try a Helicopter. It was published on August 30th of 1965, and reads as follows. Vinh Long, Vietnam. Hunting elephants no longer means long days spent in the jungle following trails, or the fear of being attacked by wild beasts. If you go modern, get a helicopter. The Army's 114th Aviation Battalion's Cobra platoon on temporary duty from Vinh Long to Hue was on a reconnaissance mission 10 miles south of Cam Lo when 24-year-old Chief Warrant Officer Tony Cosimano of Jamestown, New York, spotted an elephant in the foothills. Orders are to shoot all elephants in that area because they are used by the Viet Cong as pack animals. So Specialist 4 John Murphy, the 20-year-old gunner, brought the elephant down with 6 shots from his machine gun. The pilot, Captain Robert F. Molinelli, 32, Pocatello, Idaho, then contacted nearby Montagnards who badly needed fresh meat and flew them to the location. 4 men were brought in as security guards and 7 to do the cutting. Several copter trips were required to carry the thousands of pounds of meat to the waiting villages. The Montagnard village at Cam Lo was built only a short while ago and was very short of food. The local village chief allotted 240 pounds of rice for a feast. This is the greatest event in our village in many years, he said. The tusks? They were given to the 114th as a souvenir. Once again, in this article, we hear another connection to Popi's service, or Popi's letters. We hear Molinelli, Cosimano, we hear 114th. Of course, this was written after Popi left, but close enough to his service for it to count. After reading this and considering all I knew about Popi, I couldn't help but be reminded of George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. Next episode, I will be sharing a piece of fiction that I wrote, inspired by all of these things, titled Shooting an Elephant in Vietnam. The photo I chose for today is taken from the inside of a helicopter. In the foreground is a soldier with his weapon. In the background, there is another helicopter also touched down in a rice paddy. There are a few soldiers on the ground around them. The following is the piece I wrote, titled Shooting an Elephant in Vietnam. It is based off of a Stars and Stripes article I found from 1965, Popi's materials, and the essay Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell. I hope you enjoy. Upon reflection, in Vinh Long and the Mekong River Delta of Vietnam, I was hated by a large number of people. This was not the first time, or the last for that matter, I had been important enough for this to happen. However, it was likely the only time that the hate was all justified. I was an American pilot, stationed in the airbase outside of town, and, caught up in the long history of Vietnamese freedom fighting, anti-American sentiment was quite resounding in the area. None of the locals had the guts to take up arms themselves, however, we knew that when we weren't around, they were giving a detailed account of our every movement to the VC. Communist eyes and ears were no doubt on every street corner outside of base. All of this was quite upsetting, as I had already made up my mind that though America was not evil, I did not belong in this foreign country, and I doubted whether or not any soldier did at all. I was not for communism or the Vietnamese people. I simply believed that the lives of all people, but mainly Americans, were more important. As for the job I was doing, I found myself increasingly filled with fear every time I boarded my helicopter, afraid that I would not come down from the air alive. I managed to make it through the war without any major injuries, all while carrying out the orders I was given, prioritizing my safe return home to my wife and kids not arriving in a pine box. One day something happened which was enlightening. It was a tiny incident, but it gave me a better glimpse than I had ever before of the real nature of our war, the real motives for why we were risking American lives in Vietnam. On our way back to base from flying some routine mission, a door gunner clogged up our radios with inaudible pleas for my attention. Upon further investigation, I found that he had spotted what he thought to be an elephant in the distance, just in a clearing near a rice paddy. He begged me to let him do something about it. I knew what I wanted to do, but I also knew what our orders were. Elephants were open season in Vietnam for us Americans. They were pack animals and suspected of moving supplies around for the enemy. We were obligated to engage them. My co-pilot reminded me of policy and insisted that we talk things over with our gunner. All it took was the threat of a reporting to my CO, and I yielded my insistence that we just fly home. I radioed what we were going to do to the other birds in formation and peeled off in pursuit of the enemy combatant. The elephant, of course, had not actually done anything, and there was no evidence presented to prove that it was complicit in VC operations. However, we pursued the beast anyway. As it turned from a fuzzy gray blob to what I knew elephants to look like, I was reminded of my recent trip to Saigon. While on R&R, a few buddies of mine thought it would be fun to visit the zoo, which, in their defense, was popularly frequented by American GIs. This zoo had a small elephant, and this particular specimen was in a tiny pen that seemed much too constrictive for quite a large mammal. I remember thinking that it was oddly charismatic for something that lived such a terrible life. Like always, I had my camera on hand and snapped quick shots of other animals or the school children that ran around on field trips, but concentrated primarily on the playful pachyderm and the way it made the children smile. How, I asked myself, how could life go on so regularly here when things are so hectic, not a whole 2-hour flight away from here? The zoo's elephant was expressive, but I remembered his eyes most. I knew not what he was thinking, but I knew something was going on behind that trunk. Piercing static feedback interrupted my thoughts as my door gunner snorted over the comms. "Turn to the right a bit so I can get a good line of sight, and don't get too low. I don't want you scaring off this Charlie. We can't let him get back into the trees." I did what I was asked, and within moments the M60 roared to life. My co-pilot screamed in approval, fueled by adrenaline and testosterone, but I felt so alone, since no one at base or in the nearby village really knew what we were doing. Elephants were important to most natives in this country. I had seen a few statues of them in temples I visited since they were an essential part of Vietnam's cultural heritage, and, according to our intel, also crucial to maintaining VC supply lines. But where were the natives now? And why could they not fire up a few warning shots letting us know that their soldiers are not to be trifled with so easily? I obviously had no intention of shooting the elephant. I did not know how killing such a thing would help us to defend ourselves, but I let the gunner do what he was supposed to do. It was a serious matter to shoot a working elephant, I'm sure. If the intel proved true, comparable to destroying a jeep or a tank, and obviously had we not been in a war, we would not have done it. From the air, and at a distance, peacefully chewing on some grass, the elephant looked no more dangerous than a cow. I turned my head from the action, knowing I did not need to watch. Just as soon as it began, the shooting ended. The M60 was muzzled, and my gunner bragged about his heroic triumph over the radio. "What now?" I asked my co-pilot. "I'll radio base," he replied. "See if the mess hall could use some extra protein. Lord knows I'm tired of sea rations. Worst comes to worst, we can take the meat to the village. You know they're always begging for food." I looked down to see the elephant laying on its side, almost appearing to have red polka dots all over its body. The thick blood was gushing from its sides like red velvet and began pooling, eventually running downhill into the paddy. I wondered if it would stain the rice. Maybe not, I responded to myself. After all, the blood of other VC doesn't seem to. I put the bird down just next to the carcass and allowed the gunner to jump off and confirm the kill, much to his excitement. I was thankful that I had forgotten my camera in my bunk that day. I didn't know how I could have told him no if he asked me to take his picture with his trophy. As I jumped to the ground, I routinely scanned the tree line for any sign of the enemy, but the eyes of the elephant ensnared me. I could not look away. They were open. They were expressive. Just like the elephant I had seen just weeks before. The sad existence in the zoo didn't seem so bad after all. That elephant would never have to worry about strafing from foreign combatants. The gunner immediately began dressing the animal. We may have been thousands of miles away from home and carving up something foreign, but a farm boy always somehow knew the best way to field dress a carcass. With the help of the co-pilot, he made quick work of the body, and by the time he was done, we got word back from the base that we did not need the meat. We were told that it would be best if we gave it to the village as an act of gory philanthropy. My guys asked me to help load everything on the Huey, but I insisted on maintaining the perimeter, even if I did only have my .45 on me. I knew I'd have enough work on my hands when we got back to base, and I had to wash away all the blood from the inside and outside of the chopper. I always ended up having to do that myself anyway. When we touched down in the village, we were greeted by a large crowd which seemed to grow by the minute. We landed in a cow pasture, just outside of the main thoroughfare, and people began blocking the roads on either side. I looked at the sea of yellow faces above the garish clothes. Their faces all seemingly happy and excited over this gift, but also almost surprised that an elephant had actually been shot. As my guys transferred the meat to a wooden cart, the villagers watched us as they would watch a conjurer about to form a trick. Who knew if they liked us, but with the meat in our hands, we were interesting enough to watch. Children surrounded us with hands out, almost as if asking to pet the damn thing, and I had but a few pieces of chocolate on me that I handed out with vigor. What else was I to do to help those kids? The older ones stood in the back of the crowd and simply smiled and laughed. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn the laughter was almost uncomfortable. But we were always assured by the village elders that the children loved us for saving them from the communists. What did I really care what was true? After we finished, the village elders insisted that we take the tusks as a gift for our generosity. We knew we could not refuse and loaded them back onto the copter. Before we started up and flew away, my co-pilot looked at me with his longing eyes. "Sir, there are 3 of us and only 2 tusks. Obviously someone's going to have to go home empty-handed. The guy who bagged the thing certainly deserves one, and so does the guy who held the bird steady. It's yours." My stomach sank at the thought of bringing home the big stick of ivory and hanging it above a mantel. "It's yours, and that's an order," I replied. Before I knew it, we were back in the air, the villagers down below waving goodbye to us as we flew away. It was at that moment, as I sat there clutching the yoke, that I first grasped the hollowness and futility of America's dominion in the East. Here we were, American men with our guns and helicopters, flying away from a timid native crowd. In our minds, we were angels of freedom coming from the sky, but in reality, we were only an absurd group of puppets pushed to and fro by the will of men on the radio, doing everything they can to make the yellow faces on the ground submit. I realized at that moment that when America turns tyrant, it is its own freedom that it destroys, because through its rule it attempts to suppress evil native forces, which actually believe us Americans to be destructive imperialists, and in every interaction, us soldiers do nothing more than what everyone expects of us. The voices on the radio expect us to follow orders and protocols to free the country of the Reds, while the villagers on the ground expect us to do things like shoot elephants, then come down from the sky and present them with the meat. "Here is what we think of your heritage and beloved animals. Be thankful that we allow you to eat it so we don't make you starve," they must think. We do nothing more than act the way that we are expected to act. The expectations, however, always at odds with one another. We committed to shooting the elephant when we boarded the Huey that morning. To come all that way from America, load ourselves up onto a helicopter that cost millions, strap a machine gun to its side, commit to fighting the VC, and then to not shoot an elephant when we saw one. No, that was impossible. The VC would know that we did not have control, that we were not in power, and our time in Vietnam, all of America's time in Vietnam, was one long struggle to maintain control. If we lost control here, the voices on the radio must have been afraid of losing control all across the world and could not let that happen. But I did not want to shoot the elephant. I watched him walk about the rice paddy, not much different than the one that had brought me joy just weeks before. It seemed to me that it would be murder to shoot him, even if he somehow helped the VC. I was not squeamish about killing animals, or men for that matter, but I had never shot an elephant and realized I never wanted to. When we landed back at the base, there were endless discussions about the shooting of the elephant. My CO was elated since it was a win-win-win. We killed a VC, The village got some meat, and his boys got to keep a token to remember Vietnam fondly by. A few days later, some boys from Stars and Stripes came by to ask about what happened, but I simply referred them to my gunner and co-pilot. They always had more to say anyway. I tried my best to forget the elephant and the look in its eyes, and managed to do so by the time I left Vietnam, but that was really only because that memory was replaced by even more gruesome images. I was first reminded of the poor thing when I returned home. The trip back to Florida was long and tiring, but I was relieved to walk through my front door and hug my family. My wife and 2 oldest sons greeted me on the front stoop with big hugs and many I love yous. My youngest ran to us when he realized Daddy did actually come home and his older brothers weren't just telling lies again. He was clutching his favorite toy as he came from his room, a stuffed blue elephant with stunningly expressive but inanimate eyes. "Hey there, Brett," I said as I lifted him into the air and grabbed him tight. "How about we go to the store and get you one of those new G.I. Joe dolls to play with?" I'm Alex Lowy, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Popi wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.